All right, so let's look at the yoga for the different doshas. And I think this will give you a little bit more clarity on how Ayurveda and yoga intersect and how you can apply some of these principles to your personal practice, depending on which stage of life you're in or where you're imbalanced. And it may help you understand exactly why you're drawn to certain practices. All right, so we know that Ayurveda and yoga are like sister sciences. And they both come from India. They both developed at the same time. They're both stemmed from the Vedas. The yoga is just kind of like a physical practice or a kriya that relates to one of the healing techniques of Ayurveda. Understanding the elements and the doshas can enrich and deepen the practice. So within all of us, we have all three doshas. We know this. When balanced, we experience the positive qualities of these constitutions or the doshas or the elements. When unbalanced, we experience the negative qualities. Example, when we are well hydrated, our voice is clear, our skin is stretchy, elastic, soft, supple. We feel stable. We feel like we're able to go with the flow. We feel good. But if we have too much water, then we could have water retention in our body. We could feel sluggish. We could have like phlegm. We could feel nauseous in our digestive system because there's too much water in the stomach. So that's how, we know whether or not we're imbalanced in that area. And if we don't have enough water, of course, on the other side, we might be dehydrated. So our mouth might be dry. We might have cracked lips. Our skin might be easily chapped. We could have headaches. We could have scanty urine. Love that word, scanty. We could even have like a tightness in the joints and in the body because there isn't this flow. We can have dryness in different places. So we have to find the right balance. So not too dry, not too wet, right? So that right hydration point for us. And speaking of hydration, just because you're drinking enough water doesn't necessarily mean you're hydrated, because you have to be able to absorb that water properly. That's a subject for our individual consultations for sure. Okay, so we know that yoga and meditation is also pacifying or balancing for all three doshas, but it sort of depends on our approach, right? If you approach with a lot of intensity your practice, the way you approach other things, then your pitta might go up. If you are inconsistent with your practice, and you may not be able to derive the same benefits or like enough benefits for it to really be healing and balancing for you. And if you do only a certain type of practice, let's say you are feeling pretty sluggish and pretty imbalanced in kapha, you feel tired, for example. If you do only restorative yoga, it's not necessarily going to be balancing for you. All right, so each dosha has sort of a little bit of a unique needs, and we're going to look at that now. So Vata, as a reminder, is a combination of air and space. So sometimes I start with Kapha, sometimes I start with Vata. Pitta is almost always in the middle. So today we're starting with Vata, just because it's a dosha that goes out of balance most frequently with people, especially in our climate and with the pressures that we have in our social circles and in society in general. So Vata is air and space, and when Vata is high, we can feel just like, like how do you know you're out of balance? Well, you're forgetful, you might be uncertain, you might have difficulty making decisions, your digestive system will be affected, you might feel gassy, bloated, constipated, general confusion, lonely, bouts of depression or the blues. Like it doesn't have to be a full-blown depression, but you can just feel kind of like, out of it, or frightened, underweight, weak, anxious, stiff, or restless in the body. And what's interesting about Vata is that it can come in waves. Like you'll be fine one minute, and then all of a sudden this, like, you hear something or someone mentions something that triggers you, and it sets your Vata off into a little spin or a little tornado out into the abyss of fear and doubt, right? So You know, if it continues, it will have like a more lasting effect in the Vata imbalance. So things like aches and pains, physical manifestations of Vata, dry skin, trouble sleeping, as weak immunity, all that stuff. Okay, so what does the environment, what can we do to enhance our Vata or pacify the Vata with the environment? So because Vata is like a little bit frantic and all over the place, you need something that's soothing. Soothing for Vata. Vata needs soothing. So they need supportive and soothing. That's like the main thing. So calming music, calming, peaceful environment, soft colors. They're very excitable. So to pacify that excitableness, you do something calm, stable, relaxing, chill, basically. Soft colors mean you could just like, if you're not going to repaint your wall every time you're out of balance, right? But you might just change your clothes. You know, if you're wearing dark clothes, you might want to lighten up a little bit. Warm colors will help offset the coolness of Vata too. So just like, you know, when I say soft colors, it could be like warm, soft colors that you just wear. My teacher says you should never wear black underwear or a black bra because it closes those chakras. I don't know if that's true, but that's one of her color theories. You could experiment with that if you're in a Vata cloud. So coming to the practice, so a flow practice, because Vata needs to channel that energy. So there's a lot of irregularity in Vata. So something that channels that energy, that kind of connects the nervous system and the body, the mind and the body, because sometimes we get stuck here. So the Pawan Muktasana series, which is those joint mobility exercises, starting with the toes and working their way up to the jaw, help to release the stiffness in the joints, promote the circulation of synovial fluid, increase the lubrication of the joints. So it sort of like brings in that water element, which Kapha is sorely lacking in. And of course, because Pawan Muktasana is close to the ground, it has a grounding element, which helps like lower Vata's like anxiety and like kind of let it go. So the idea for Vata is you have to channel that energy out. You can't just stop it because it'll create a pressure, right? You have to slowly release. A slow, gentle practice. They cannot stay in postures for very long. What happens is if Vata, depending on how out of balance Vata is, let's say you're very out of balance and you have a lot of aches and pains. If you're required to stay in a posture for a long time, a little ache becomes a very big ache. And also it can be very anxiety producing. So yin practices, although they seem like they could be pacifying for Vata, it really depends. First of all, yin practices that are not used without props are highly, how should I put it politically correct? Highly not good for Vata because Vata needs support. So I once was in a yin practice. Do you know what yin yoga is? It's like long hold poses, like really long. And oftentimes, I think it's changing now. So this was a long time ago. This was my first and only yin practice. Sorry if you love yin, but my experience has been, probably because my Vata was out of balance, not good. So I was in a plow. Do you know the plow pose or halasana? So you're in like in candle or shoulder stand, and then your feet over your head like that. And they're like, okay, 5-minute plow. And I was like, what? 5-minute plow? And I was like, well, okay, I'm gonna just follow along because also the teacher was a friend of mine. And I was like, I was in pain like within the first 15 seconds, let alone 5 minutes into it. Maybe it was 3 minutes, but it felt like 100 years. This was in Ottawa. And and it was a really uncomfortable process because like, and the idea is like, you're supposed to go through the discomfort and release it. Like I just think that's not practical and not safe either, especially in a posture as risky as plow. So, but you can do restorative type practices as long as you don't hold them for extensive amounts of time, or if you're really supported, because Vata needs support, right? So if you're supported with a bunch of props, then that can be helpful. Like a forward bend pose with like your forehead on the table or on a chair or on a pile of blocks is fine. But a forward bend where you're just kind of like hanging in space, not good, not good. So generally, when I have people with Vata, I just keep it moving along because I don't want their Vata to get stuck in any particular area, and I don't want them to start like frantically thinking or freaking out. As I said, some restorative postures are good. Grounding postures, standing, balancing postures. Balancing is really good for them, especially balancing, like when you can be out of balance in Vata at any stage of life, but the chances of being out of balance in the last stage of life, in the senior years, is much higher because that's Vata phase, right? So, and you see, like, actually they say, I'm gonna stop this for a second. They say that one of the leading causes of death for seniors is lack of balance. And the reason why, and this happened to my grandmother, both of them actually, they slipped and fell, and one of them broke her hip. She was in the hospital, and then she caught something else. Her immunity system couldn't repair the hip, and she died. It was pretty quick and painless for her, but the other one fell and hurt herself. And it was like, it like really affected the quality of her life for years. And then eventually she passed away. It wasn't necessarily because of the fall, but when you fall, and you're in that phase of life, bones are more brittle. So the impact of falling when you're 80 is a lot greater than the impact of falling when you're 8, right? Because when you're 8 years old, you're still in Kapha phase, you're made out of rubber. So when you fall down, it's possible to break your arm, but it's rare because usually, my kid falls down about 12 times a day. He is like black and blue all over, and he like might cry for a second, and like 3 seconds later, he's trying to do the same thing. And I'm like, whoa, Nelly, you can't jump from the dining room table to the couch. Obviously he's not allowed to do that, but sometimes he kind of gets his Vata kind of takes over, and his daringness of his Pitta comes out. But all this to say is that balance is really important at every stage of life, but in particular in the Vata stage of life. So if you're going to work with seniors ever, or you're going to share this practice with your grandmother, you want to make sure that she has a chair nearby, or she can be like, whoa, like she might practice her balance, but she needs to have some support with her. So that's important. Okay, back to the Vata practice. Also, reminder, it doesn't have to be stage of life. It doesn't have to be like your own personal life circumstances. Winter is Vata destabilizing. So all of these things apply to winter as well. If you're doing yoga in the snow, you'd also want to consider this like Vata practice. And obviously, if you're going to do yoga outside in the snow, you crazy nut. But if you do, you want to keep the practice moving because you don't want people to get super, super cold. All right, so for the yoga teacher. So if you're ever in a class where you're like, this was really unsatisfying, and you kind of look at the way the yoga teacher approached you, it could also offset, like it might not be anything wrong with the yoga teacher, but it may not be complementary to where you're at. So ideally, your yoga teacher is attentive, understanding, and supportive. So they don't push you too far out of your comfort zone. They support you. They don't like assist you and then leave you alone to like fend for yourself in a handstand, for example. Like they're with you and they're listening. Pranayama exercises that are good for Vata, alternate nostril breathing, also because that really affects the nervous system. The bumblebee breath, and just deep 3-part breath, like really connecting with the breath. Meditation, best if you start with short sits. So just a short like practice, maybe 5 minutes, because most of the time your attention span is a little bit shorter when you're in Vata mode. Sometimes a blindfold and or a timer can be helpful because it'll help you focus your energy. So even for me, if I don't have a timer when I'm meditating, I kind of get lost in space and I'm like, how long have I been sitting here? Has it really only been 2 minutes? Has it been 5 minutes? Has it been 30 minutes? Like, where am I? So if you have a timer, when I started meditation, I would do this like, okay, I'm not going to open my eyes until I hear the timer. Because otherwise I was like checking, how long has it been? How much time do I have? You know, so you can, a blindfold could also help you with that. So it can help you block out some of those distractions. So obviously you want to sit in a comfortable position supported by props. Again, this word supported, supportive yoga teacher, supportive props, supportive practice, supportive environment. All of this is important for Vata. And because Vata is creative and imaginative, sometimes a guided visualization is really nice for them. I also recently learned about 3D sound. That's very cool. Like, it's music that sounds like it's coming from every direction, like from the ground and everything. And 3D sound meditations are super cool, I think, for all three doshas, but it's particularly for Vata. Okay, warm, and then other suggestions to balance Vata. This is just a reminder from last session from Ayurvedic second class. Warm meals, soups and stews, regular routine. For meals, work and sleep. So regularity, gentle exercise, walking is great, yoga, swimming because you're in water, grounding, sleep, shavasana, anything in nature like hiking or whatever. Sleep is good for Vata, shavasana, warm oil treatments, reduce travel, stress, loud noise. Or be highly mindful of your Vata if you're traveling, if you're in a noisy place, if you're highly stressed. For example, you don't have to change everything, you just need to be aware. Reduce dry, cold, or raw food. Avoid stimulants like caffeine, white sugar, and drugs, because stimulating things for your nervous system aren't awesome. Okay, so that's Vata. I wonder if one of you would like to read the next part so that I can give my voice a little bit of a break and you can give your ears a little bit of a break so you don't just have to hear my voice. Does one of you feel like you want to read? You'll have to unmute, of course. If there are no volunteers, I will continue. Any volunteers? Anyone? Micheline, it looks like you're ready to open your microphone. Is that true? No?
I can read.
Okay, great. Thanks, Shannon. Oh, Micheline is looking for the document. I understand. I just, before you begin, Shannon, I'll just read one of the comments. This is relating to the Vata, and the comment is, I can relate. I once suffered through 5 minutes of toe pose. 5 minutes of toe pose? Is that instructor nuts? Woof, I thought I would never be able to stand flat on my feet again. I can imagine. That's terrible. Okay, so I'll pull up the screen so that we have it. And Shannon, you can read from your page or you can read from the screen, whatever is easier for you.
Okay. Pitta, fire and water. When Pitta is high, we can feel irritated, angry, frustrated, overly hot, acidic, jealous, overly competitive, controlling, and obsessive. We can have heartburn, skin irritations, loose stool or diarrhea, extreme hunger, and high blood pressure. Environment.
Yes.
Okay. Environment, moderate to cool temperature. Outdoors in nature is best, out of direct sun, and calming music or sounds.
I'm going to interject. So I'll interject after each component so I can add, or I might stop you if I have to add something. So there's something very funny. Like attracts like, right? So the best example of this is the couch potato. So somebody who's really high in kapha, the couch potato, what would happen with the couch potato? I'll just stop sharing for a second. So the couch potato is on the couch, and obviously being on the couch is something that they are drawn to. So so it's hard to get them off the couch, and they're on the couch and they want to stay on the couch, even though if they know it's not great for them. The Vata person is all excited and moving around and fidgeting all over the place, and they want to continue in that momentum. The inertia of the high Vata, just like the inertia of the high Pitta, keeps them like an object that, what is that? The object that stays in motion, continues in motion. Something like that. Yes, you'll have to write it in the chat so I quote it accurately. But an object in motion stays in motion, right? So if you are in that inertia of the high Vata, the high Kapha, or the high Pitta, it'll be hard, it'll be uncomfortable for you to make the adjustments. So so for high Vata, you're very excited. You want to do all those crazy poses. You want to do those fast-paced, like super flow practices, but you are going to feel terrible afterwards because you're going to be like, I'm exhausted. Or you might do 4 days of yoga intensively, or do a 30-day yoga challenge, and then you're like dead because you can't continue because that niche, like eventually it'll like wear out. So yes, perpetual motion. So Pitta in particular, because of its drive, they are the ones that want to do power yoga, athletic yoga, yoga for muscle building, hot yoga, sweaty, hot pressure yoga. They want to do it the most intensity because they're already intense. So their intensity, their inertia, and their tendency is to stay in that high intense mode. So unwinding from that is hard. So it's like we have these addictive behaviors that don't necessarily serve us in the long run, but it's our preference, right? So so even though Pitta really likes hot yoga, it's not the best for them because they're already overheated. So they need something that's cooling. So when I say cooling yoga, yoga in nature, this is what I mean. We kind of have to counterbalance it, which is hard because because some people will be like, well, I don't like that. I'm like, you don't like it because you're in an inertia because you have this habit, right? So it's kind of like what will counterbalance, but not in such a bold, crashing way. Just like you're not going to like throw the couch potato off the couch and push them into a hot yoga class. They will die, right? Like that's too extreme. We can't go from the couch into hot yoga, but we could go from the couch to restorative yoga, from restorative yoga to slow flow yoga, from slow flow yoga to a vinyasa practice, from vinyasa practice to maybe hot yoga, for example, for kapha. And for vata, you cannot, just as I was saying, you cannot go from like a super excited, or it doesn't even have to be excited. They could be like super nervous into yin yoga. Like that's too extreme. They need to do, okay, let's do breathing. Let's do this. Let's do slow, and let's do a little bit of creativity to keep your vata interested. But we're going to like calm it down. We're going to do grounding. Too slow is going to be like really hard for them to focus. But too fast is going to keep them in that like kind of excited state. For Pitta, it's the same. You can't just go, okay, Pitta, you need restorative yoga. You need yoga. You need yin yoga. You need to stop. You need to do cooling breath. They don't like to be told what to do. I know, because I am Pittic. I don't like to be told what to do, even when it's me telling myself what to do. But what we do need is we need like a structure that we can understand that's intellectual, that will stimulate our brain. And we need a practice that is going to be at once calming of our pitta, but also will keep the interest of the pitta. So interest of the pitta would be something that's challenging. Being outside in nature is amazing because pitta really, really resets itself in nature. There's something about the perfectionism of Pitta that is like humbled by nature. So nature is in itself like a perfection, right? And so being surrounded by nature, or even being surrounded by plants, or in front of a window where you can look out on nature, is grounding for Pitta. So we'll go back to the handout and I will let Shannon continue. Shannon, you are doing a great job. Keep going.
Yoga practice. Long hold practice or slow flow vinyasa. Iyengar style yin or restorative is therapeutic. Should avoid hot yoga or intense practices. Needs to gently stretch abdomen and cool. Cooling poses, forward bends. Some challenging poses, arm balances. Instructor is knowledgeable and explains postures well. Pranayama, cooling breath, alternate nostril, kapalabhati.
Kapalabhati.
Okay.
So just the 2 points I'm going to highlight here. Stretching of the abdomen, because the abdomen is sort of like the Pitta center. When Pitta is intense, there can be like a little bit of tightness around the diaphragm. So Vata keeps their tightness here in the neck. And Pitta tends to keep it in the core area, like in the abdomen and the diaphragm. So postures that like Sphinx pose or Cobra or any gentle back bend help to open up and release this intensity or pressure in the abdominal area. And it actually becomes like a bit of a release. When I say instructor is knowledgeable and explains postures well, most Pitta people are not into fluffy shit. So they don't want to hear that the light is shining up their anus and opening their third eye and like connecting to the gorgeous nature and the infinite possibilities of the universe. They don't want that. They want practical, concise, to the point. So if you've ever been irritated by teachers who talk like that and sort of they're like really out there, it's probably because your Pitta is like a little bit out of balance. And so you're like, I don't know, like that. But you want to posture that a teacher that will make sense to you. Like, do this for that. Pitta likes that. They also like to follow sequence. So Vata probably won't notice if the yoga teacher does only one side and not the other side, but Pitta will. Pitta will notice, okay, how come we only do that posture on one side? And it'll bother them. And Kapha probably will be relieved because they'll be like, oh, I only had to do one side. Great. So that's sort of like the difference. Okay, keep going. Let's go to meditation.
Meditation. Start with soft belly breathing exercise. Comfortable position, focus on breath. Remove pressure, natural environment. Mantra-based meditation is helpful.
So a mantra-based meditation could be a japa meditation like Tara referred to, where they have like almost a goal. So if they're following a bead, so if the mantra, the mala is a string of beads of 108 beads, and they're holding the bead and they're saying their mantra, it could be life is beautiful, as simple as that, or like Om Namah Shivaya, or Om, or a prayer that they repeat, and they move the bead, they go around and they do a cycle of 108 mantras or 216 mantras, they will feel purposeful. They also, so any kind of, it doesn't have to be with a bead, but that's even better for Vata, for Pitta. Also counting the breaths is also helpful because their mind is active, not overly excited like when Vata is out of balance, but they're structured. So they want to have a purpose. Also a timer could be good for them too, because like, okay, I'm going to sit for 20 minutes and that's their focus. And then they'll feel satisfied because they did that. Some of you have expressed like, I'm not sure if it's a real practice if I only do it for this. That's your Pitta, right? Because your Pitta has like a preconceived notion of what is a practice. So you can support that without you don't have to stop it. You can just say, okay, I'm going to do 5 sun salutations and then do 5. Or I'm going to sit and meditate for 10 minutes and then do that. So it'll help you stay on track. You can continue.
Other suggestions to balance Pitta. Meals and beverages at room temperature. Let go of anger, write and burn. favor leisure and spend time in nature, less pressure like deadlines or competition, reduce stimulants, spicy and sour food, and eat regular meals.
Right. So practicing in front of a mirror for Pitta could be problematic because Pitta is already pretty externally focused. So a mirror just adds that extra element of like, how do I look in the posture? How do I look compared to that person in the posture? And it becomes like, it's not really super pacifying for Pitta. And then if you're not familiar with writing and burning, it's the exercise of where you write stream of conscious, all the stuff that's in your head, and then you burn or destroy, tear up the piece of paper. All right, let's move on to Kapha. I can read this unless Shannon, you want to continue, or if there's somebody else who wants to continue. Okay, I'll do it. So Kapha is air and water, or sorry, earth and water. When Kapha is high, we can feel lethargic. We already covered a lot of this stuff. Lazy, unmotivated, a cloudy mind, congested, mucusy, slow, heavy, overly attached, needy. We can oversleep. We can be overweight. We can have constant cravings for sweets. So an environment that's pacifying for Kapha is stimulating. So warm or hot environment, stimulating colors, stimulating music, something that like wakes them up. It's like wake up Kapha type time, like a nice bright orange t-shirt will help. Active, vigorous yoga, but it has to start slowly. So it needs to be a slow build. Ashtanga, Vinyasa, or hot yoga is therapeutic for them, but again, a slow build depends on how extreme the Kapha imbalance is. Should avoid sedentary or yin practices because they'll likely fall asleep and stay in their Kapha phase. Needs to build confidence and motivation. So sometimes it's a lack of confidence and shyness. They might feel uncomfortable in the yoga class, especially if they have to stare at themselves in the mirror. Like I really think mirrors in yoga are like completely unnecessary, unless it's just once in a while to check your alignment. Like if you're practicing alone, sometimes it's good to have a mirror just once in a while to see how your positions are. Invigorating poses like standing warriors, back bends, postures that move, like keep moving, sun salutations, of course, or any kind of movement, breath of joy, that kind of thing. Encouraging postures. So Kapha is already really good at balance. So balancing postures they love, hip opening postures they love because they're usually pretty supple in their hips and they have good balance. So postures that, you know, doing postures that are like, that it keeps them interested, just the same way that we do challenging poses to keep Pitta interested in, and creative, funky poses to keep Vata interested in. We do balancing and hip postures for Kapha. And the instructor is nice. They want somebody who's friendly and welcoming and encouraging and compassionate. If you have been in a class and you're like a little bit, like if you're new to a studio, sometimes I've had like this little like shyness when I walk into a studio in a new city, or I'm on vacation, I want to try it, and I get an instructor who isn't nice and welcoming. I feel very out of place and I feel very awkward, and it's like my Kapha is like a little bit hurt. And because I have a good amount of Kapha in me too, I may not ever want to practice at that studio again. Or if you are a Kapha person, or a Kapha person is new to yoga, they may never want to do yoga again if they have a bad experience with their instructor. Pitta and Vata probably won't notice or care, but Kapha will, and they'll remember. Pranayama exercises that are beneficial for Kapha: Kapalbhati, a breath of fire, bumblebee breath. On the note of nice instructors and nice experiences, Kapha is the phase of life for children, so it's the developmental stage, which is why my approach to teaching kids yoga is always fun and encouraging and like laughter based, and never this is what you have to do and this is for your stress and this is how you do this. I don't care about alignment for kids. It's just I want them to have a positive experience because I want to implant a positive connection between yoga and enjoyment. So later in life, when they need it, because they don't really need it as kids, but when they really need it when they're teenagers, they'll be like, oh, that thing that I liked when I was a kid, yoga, let's try it. And then it'll be beneficial. And I think that the history of yoga has also supported that, which is why the kids yoga practices or have like animal pose. I mean, the postures are named after animals, and it's something to like kind of keep kids engaged. So meditation for Kapha, the one consideration is that Kapha may fall asleep, so they definitely need to be sitting upright. You can start with breathing exercises to wake up their mind, particularly the bumblebee breath or the Brahmari breath. A guided meditation is good. So an instructor that's like, and helping to reconnect with your breath, close your eyes. If your mind goes off into the distance, come back to the breath. Something with a mantra will help bring them back. And it's really just to avoid them like completely spacing out and falling asleep. So, or like kind of going into like a daze. Also, other suggestions to balance Kapha, light meals, 2 anjali. So anjali is a handful. So like just this size of the food in your belly at a time, because Kapha can only process a little bit at a time. A little bit of information, a little bit of food, a little bit of practice. They can only do things a small amount at a time. They really should only be sleeping like a maximum of 8 hours. Best if they wake up early. Regular activity, movement, exercise, walking, everything is really important for them because their circulation is a little bit slower than the other doshas. A regular favor new activities and experiences. So they might benefit from yoga with goats, for example, because they need something new. Pitta would hate yoga for goats, and Vata might think it's really like creative. So that's sort of, you know, just like there's all kinds of different yoga types of practices, Kapha could benefit from trying different things. Reduce sweet, heavy, and oily food. Favor spicy, bitter, and light food. Eat only when hungry. Work on letting go and self-expression. So they tend to hold things. Remember, they have that hoarding tendency, hoarding of like thoughts. Not necessarily their mind is busy, but they might hold on to things like, no, I didn't like yoga that one time, and so now I never want to go back. They'll like hold on to it. They'll be attached to that, their first experience. So they need to work on letting go and expressing themselves. So like Om and chanting is also really good because they also have a lovely voice. So it's good for them. All right, so those are I hope that kind of helped you, give you some idea. Let's take a short break and then we'll do our practice.